What's going on, YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is Ted Strokes at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video. Fam, I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes. In this video, you will find history definitions, scripture information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning. The truth, keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button. Young elder gang, hit that subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. Before the United States Constitution shaped the nation we know today, there was an earlier ambitious experiment in government, the Articles of Confederation. This document marked the first attempt by the newly independent American states to form a unified national government after breaking free from British rule. The 13 colonies, now proud states, had just emerged victorious from the Revolutionary War. Their hard-won independence made them deeply wary of any form of centralized authority that might threaten their newfound freedoms. Their answer was to create a loose alliance, a so-called League of Friendship, where each state retained its sovereignty, independence, and most of its power. The states agreed to cooperate, but only on matters they all consented to. Drafted in 1777 and finally ratified in 1781, the Articles of Confederation became America's very first written constitution, setting the stage for national governance. The national government created by the Articles was intentionally weak. It was designed to handle only a few essential functions, such as defense, diplomacy, and managing relations with Native American tribes. Most of the real power remained with the states themselves. The central government could not levy taxes, regulate commerce, or enforce its own laws without the state's approval, making it dependent on their cooperation. This system reflected the founders' deep fear of tyranny and their desire to protect individual liberty. However, it also made it extremely difficult for the nation to act as one, especially in times of crisis or disagreement. The Articles were a necessary first step in America's political evolution, teaching the founders hard lessons about the delicate balance between preserving liberty and creating an effective, unified government. As the weaknesses of the Articles became increasingly clear, especially the inability to raise funds or resolve disputes between states, the need for a stronger framework led to the drafting of the U.S. Constitution. Understanding the Articles of Confederation is essential for understanding America's journey toward a more perfect union, and the enduring quest to balance freedom with effective governance. The Articles of Confederation established a unique and somewhat fragile system of government for the new United States. At its core, the Articles created a single legislative body known as the Confederation Congress, a gathering of representatives from each of the 13 states, meeting to make decisions for the collective good. In this Congress, every state, regardless of its size or population, had exactly one vote. There was no president to lead the nation, no national court system to interpret laws, and no executive branch to enforce them. The absence of these institutions meant that the government was intentionally kept weak and decentralized. All legislative power was concentrated in this Congress, but even then, the states maintained strict control over their delegates and the decisions they made. States could recall their delegates at any time, ensuring that their interests were always protected and that no delegate could act independently for long. Passing major laws required the approval of at least 9 out of the 13 states, making it difficult to enact significant legislation. Amending the Articles was even harder. It required a unanimous vote from all 13 states, making meaningful change nearly impossible and locking the system in place. The national government depended entirely on the states for both its authority and its resources. Congress could request money, troops, or supplies, but it had no power to compel the states to comply. If a state refused to cooperate or ignored Congress's requests, there were no real consequences. Congress had no power to enforce its will or punish noncompliance. This structure was a direct reaction to the oppressive British rule the colonies had just escaped. Americans were determined to avoid creating another powerful central authority that could threaten their hard-won liberties. The result, however, was a government so decentralized and weak that it often struggled to function effectively, especially when faced with national challenges or disputes between states. In many ways, the Confederation was less a unified nation and more a loose treaty or alliance among 13 independent and sovereign states, each jealously guarding its own power. As the country began to grow and face new challenges, such as managing Western lands, trade disputes, and foreign threats, this arrangement would soon be put to the test, revealing its many flaws. The weaknesses of this system quickly became apparent, setting the stage for calls to create a stronger, more effective national government. The Confederation Congress had a few key powers: declaring war, making treaties, coining money, and managing relations with Native Americans. But its limitations were crippling. Congress couldn't tax. It could only request money from the states, which often refused. Without funds, the government was perpetually broke and unable to pay debts or soldiers. There was no executive to enforce laws, and no national courts to resolve disputes. Congress could pass resolutions, but had no way to make states comply. It also couldn't regulate trade between states or with foreign nations. States imposed tariffs on each other, sparking economic conflict and chaos. The national government was more an advisory committee than a true authority. The lack of enforcement and financial power left the United States weak and divided. These flaws would soon lead to crisis. The weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation weren't just theoretical. They led to real-world disasters that threatened the very survival of the young nation. After the Revolution, the government was drowning in war debt, unable to pay the soldiers who had fought for independence or the foreign creditors who had bankrolled the war effort. Veterans returned home to find empty promises and empty pockets. The national currency collapsed, becoming almost worthless. Merchants and citizens alike refused to accept it, and the nation's credit was ruined, making it nearly impossible to borrow money or conduct business with other countries. With no power to raise funds, the central government left states to tax their citizens heavily. Farmers, in particular, suffered under crushing tax burdens, leading to widespread hardship and resentment in rural communities. In 1786, this frustration exploded into Shays Rebellion in Massachusetts. Angry farmers, many of them veterans, rose up against mounting debts, foreclosures, and what they saw as an unresponsive government. The national government was powerless to help. It had no standing army, no money, and no authority to intervene or restore order, leaving the crisis to spiral. The rebellion was eventually put down by the state militia, but the violence and chaos terrified leaders across the country, who saw how close the nation had come to anarchy. Shays Rebellion exposed the Article's fatal flaws. The central government couldn't maintain order, protect property, or respond to emergencies. The system was simply too weak to govern effectively. Influential Americans, statesmen, merchants, and ordinary citizens realized that the so-called League of Friendship among the states was failing to hold the country together. Calls for a stronger, more effective government grew louder as people demanded real solutions to the nation's mounting crises and instability. The experiment in radical decentralization had reached its breaking point. The states were divided, the union was fragile, and the future was uncertain. The nation was on the brink of collapse. It was clear to all that change was now inevitable, and a new path forward had to be found to save the American experiment. The crises of the 1780s made reform urgent. Shays' Rebellion was the final warning. The Articles were failing. Leaders called for a convention to fix the government. Instead, they created something entirely new, the United States Constitution. The Constitution established a strong federal government with three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Power shifted from the states to the national government, which could now tax, regulate commerce, and enforce laws. This was a dramatic departure from the Articles' weak Congress. The founders believed liberty required order and effective government. The new Constitution aimed to balance national strength with individual and state rights. It was a bold solution to the failures of the Articles. The Constitution created a new system, federalism, dividing power between the national government and the states. But the balance now favored the center. Federal law became the supreme law of the land, overriding conflicting state laws. The government could tax, regulate trade, and maintain a standing army. The President and Supreme Court gave the nation real executive and judicial power. This structure made the government more stable and effective. Not everyone was convinced. Anti-federalists feared a new tyranny. The debate over federal versus state power became the era's central conflict. Ratification was hard-won, with the promise of a Bill of Rights to protect individual freedoms. The new federal power would shape the nation's future. Economic interests drove the push for a stronger government. Bankers and merchants holding government debt needed a government that could pay them back. Alexander Hamilton led the charge for a centralized economy and national credit. The Constitution allowed the federal government to assume state debts and stabilize the economy. Foreign powers, seeing America's weakness, refused fair trade and threatened borders. A unified government was needed to command respect abroad and protect national interests. Economic and foreign policy concerns united powerful groups behind the Constitution. For many, national strength was the only way to secure liberty and prosperity. The Constitution redefined sovereignty in America. Under the Articles, states were fully sovereign, like independent countries. The Constitution created dual sovereignty. States kept local power, but the national government was supreme in its sphere. Power now came from we the people, not just the states. The United States became a single nation, not just a collection of states. Even language changed. The United States is replaced the United States are. Federalists saw this as essential for a lasting nation. Anti-federalists feared it would erase state power. The debate over sovereignty and the division of power has shaped American politics ever since. The Constitution created a new national identity and a new kind of government. The struggle over where ultimate authority should reside continues to this day. Replacing the Articles with the Constitution was a turning point in American history. It ended the experiment in radical decentralization and created a strong, unified republic. The Constitution's framework enabled economic growth, defense, and national stability. Yet the fear of centralized power and the defense of local control never disappeared. The Bill of Rights, especially the 10th Amendment, preserved the principle of federalism. The tension between federal and state power has shaped conflicts from the National Bank to the Civil War and beyond. Today's debates over government power echo those first arguments from the 1780s. Understanding the Articles' story is key to understanding America's ongoing struggle with power and liberty. It's the story of who we were and who we are still becoming.